This is one of the most unbelievable stories I think people will ever read in this country. And it's so unbelievable that I didn't believe it when I first became aware of it. But over nearly 5 years of getting the documents and piecing the jigsaw together, this is a story of a Royal Commission drug investigation that was supposed to lure corrupt police into the net went horribly wrong. It was an illegal operation in the first place. There is no doubt about that. And there could have been up to 14 deaths from a hot heroin batch that the Royal Commission sanctioned drug supplier sold on the streets of King's Cross in a 3-week period. Now, that's only the start of it. The rest of the story is that it was covered up, and those in the police force, New South Wales Police, that did become aware of this story were harassed and chased and later resigned over their knowledge of this whole operation. And it goes all the way to the top of the judicial tree in Australia.
Now, this Wood Royal Commission, you've described it as carefully managed theatre, and it actually, you say, that it exposed more corruption than there actually was in the police force of New South Wales. What was the reason for that? And you say it actually changed the New South Wales police force forever, or from here on out.
Look, there's no doubt in my mind, and no doubt in a lot of other people's minds, that the Wood Royal Commission used the media as its most effective tool. Now, we had a police force that for 3 years was on the ropes, and the way that the individual police were treated, filmed and spoken about in newspapers and on radio programs, just utterly destroyed the morale of the police department. And I have absolutely no doubt that the reason that they went about this process was to wrest control of the New South Wales Police from the police themselves and make it an arm of the government. I have recollections of Neville Wran, one of our premiers, saying in the early 80s, late 70s, that you could not rule in New South Wales without the support of the police. Well, through the Wood Royal Commission and later the Bob Carr Labor government, they did take control of the New South Wales Police, and it's been a basket case ever since.
And so if we look at someone who joins the force, so they're at the police academy, I'm sure they have very good intentions, and I'm sure those intentions aren't lost. But when they enter the force in reality, how do you think their perception of the force changes?
For a start, the police academy now is not really, I don't think it should be called a police academy, it's a university. It doesn't appear to me as though they teach any policing, street policing, to these young constables, these young officers that come out. So they come out of a university-style campus and they're confronted with all manner of things that are wrong in society, and they have inexperienced police showing them the way. And, I speak to young police and they are just emasculated by rules and regulations, by fear of management. They want to help people on the street, but they're too frightened to make decisions in case they themselves get into trouble and they have an early exit from their career. So they're not being prepared for the outside pressures. They're certainly not being prepared for the inside pressures of a police department, as I said, that's in a feeding frenzy, eating its own.
The effects of that are varied, but one that we're looking at the moment is the rise of Middle Eastern crime, which we have obviously seen across the nation, never more so in Sydney of late. How do you think that has been allowed to flourish? As
I say in the book, the Peter Ryan years were basically about introducing the British model of policing, and that is it's non-confrontational. We have all sorts of liaison officers. We have all sorts of community interaction. And the one thing they didn't do, or didn't want to do, was to confront sensitive, culturally sensitive groups head on. They'd rather walk away or back away and negotiate on another day. Well, Britain now has some of the worst crime rates in the world, and some parts of Britain are out of control, and their crime rates are worse than South Africa because they have not confronted violent offenders when they were teenagers. These teenagers have grown into adults. They've instructed the next generation of how you commit crime. This is the same as happened with Middle Eastern crime in Australia. We did not jump on top of the first generation and say, this is not how we do things in Australia. No, they backed away from it. Ryan would not allow his police to target Middle Eastern crime because it's culturally and politically sensitive. And it comes back once again, when you've got a government that's got control of the police force, I have no doubt they tell senior echelons of the police it's politically insensitive to touch Middle Eastern crime groups because they hold a large voting percentage in southwestern Sydney.
And you have described in the past that the perfect storm with crime would be when Middle Eastern crime gangs met the bikie gangs. That has happened.
That
Should
has.
we be lying awake at night worrying about this?
Look, we should be worried, and it can only get worse. And I think the perfect example is what we've seen with Sydney Airport. I don't know how, hundreds of thousands of people go through Sydney Airport on a Sunday, and to have a brazen murder in front of all these people, and it just didn't happen in one place. It went all over the actual airport, as I understand it, before this bloke was murdered. That sort of says they're not fearing anyone. They don't fear the police. They don't fear CCTV. They don't fear the public. So you've got to ask yourself, where have we come? And the perfect storm that I described to a journalist years ago was the linking of Middle Eastern crime, Pacific Islander thugs and outlaw motorcycle gangs. It just couldn't get any worse. And we now know that's occurred. And unless we really do something drastic, this will only end in a disaster.
Now, that's one very sensitive issue that you have tackled in the book. Now, also, you haven't shied away from actually naming names, particularly in regard to the Wood Royal Commission, those who were promoted from that. Are you prepared for the uproar that will come from this?
There will be the inevitable backlash, and I'm waiting. There are some review chapters to be done for the book in a couple of months. So I've kept some ammunition at the back of the book, and I fully expect they'll come out swinging, because some of these people have godlike status in the judiciary and the legal profession, and no one has ever touched the judiciary in this country, really. Not since Lionel Murphy has anyone ever named a High Court judge. So it's going to get to the stage where people are going to say, well, there might be something in this book, and for the sake of the integrity of the judicial system in Australia, somebody has to have a look at the allegations that I've got in the book, and that means a Royal Commission.
Well, we await and see. Tim Priest, thank you so much for joining us on Sky News.
Pleasure.